Hello, here I am again. Welcome to the Liminalist Live Thingamajiggle. Welcome to the Liminalist Live Thingamajiggle. Now I have an echo. That's why. That's not good. An eternal echo. Okay, turn down the volume on that. Don't even know where that's coming from. It never happened before. I was just going to say I use this camera as my mirror now, which is going to signify something. The world's eye is my mirror. Okay, so today's event, well, initially I had announced it on the podcast as that I would be looking at Vice of Kings and the superstructure or the superculture that our world is embedded in. And I do hope to include that, but something happened during the week that led me to change my mind about what I wanted to talk about today. I mean, more than one thing, actually. Some various developments occurred. So hence I came up with the alternate title, the new title, which is the Jesus Prayer in Hades. Paranoia, from Paranoia to Metanoia. But I thought I would just start with Vice of Kings anyway, because, well, it's somewhere to start. And just in case anyone here doesn't know about it, it seems unlikely, but there's a link in the chat notes too. Said error, try again. Oh, maybe you're not allowed to put links in. That's possible. Anyway, you can find it, Vice of Kings, this book. And I'm just going to read a quote from the beginning, just as a place to start. There is in society a parallel universe that is very close. All of us, whether knowingly or unknowingly, have frequent contact with it. It is populated by individuals who outwardly appear to be respectable, law-abiding, and not infrequently influential, and even popular members of society. They are found in all professions, and they sexually abuse children, some in ways that are almost unimaginably extreme. This is from Institutional Abuse and Societal Silence, an emerging global problem, the Australian and New Zealand Journal Psychiatry, January 2014. And I put that at the start of the book, partly because of the source, and a very legitimate, respectable source, institution even, and but largely because this idea that our world and our lives are embedded in a hidden world that is profoundly destructive, harmful to everyone that exists within it, and that we are shaped by it, we are traumatized by it, we are distorted by it, we are damaged, often beyond repair, without perhaps for some of us ever seeing or perhaps remembering having seen this world. We see the effects, but we don't necessarily see the causes. Now, this is, as I was just did an interview on occulture, and was just saying to him about how there is a very traditional perspective that's congruent with the one I just outlined in Christianity and other forms of religion, perhaps all of them actually, but I know it's definitely in Islam and Christianity. I think it's in the Judaism and the Torah too. I think there's a line in the Torah that if we were able to see the demons that populate this world with the naked eye, life would be intolerable to us. And we could extend that to human beings. If we were able to see human beings as they are and what they're doing, what's occurring in our society at a purely human level, regardless of whether there may be these other metaphysical principles behind it, life would be unlivable. society would be intolerable to us. But nonetheless, we're here. And what I've been doing for the past 30 years is trying to map the world that we live in, the hidden world. Not the metaphysical, or that too, I suppose, but the superculture that we're embedded in. I've been trying to reveal it, expose it to myself and to others, to map it. And one of the things that I want to look at today is not how effective I've been, but how effective that is as a strategy at all to become free. Now, I say the truth shall make you free, but what truth? What truth will make us free? Is it any truth, or is it one specific truth, or is it many specific truths? I think it's fair to say that not every truth is going to make us free, certainly not overnight. I've discovered many truths, and none of them have made me completely free, but some of them have made me more free, relatively more free. But does the accumulation of truths lead to freedom progressively, or is it, or do they not? Or is it a question of uncovering the one truth that will set us free? I don't know. These are questions. I don't have the answers, but so what happened this week that led to me giving the title to this meet that I gave? I'll recount it now, and that'll be the official starting point. That was just a little intro. It was in the thrift store, and I'd actually quit my shift. I'd ended my shift, and I'd gone to buy some groceries, and I was coming back home with the groceries, but then I saw that the garbage cans had all been emptied on the streets. So I wanted to take the garbage cans back into the thrift store, the recycling ones, so nobody would take them. And so I went into the thrift store with my groceries to leave them there while I went to get the garbage cans. And because of that, I ended up hearing this woman's story. And she was a woman that I already knew. She's written for The Seedling. Is quite a talented writer. I compared her writing to Charles Bukowski. And she had come into town some months back, perhaps over a year now, I'm not sure. And she'd been retreating from some sort of difficulties, which I won't go into. I don't quite remember them anyway, the specifics. But she had found herself very welcome at Hope, and she'd gone to the Harvest Church, which is the church that we donate clothing to, and they have a food bank, and they're very helpful to the poor and the needy. And she'd received an awful lot of help there, to the point that she'd joined the congregation. And anyway, she recounted this story, or this experience, that had happened earlier in the week, a few days earlier, that she had been driving in a truck with her grandson, and she had lost control of the vehicle, and it must have been a mountain road, because she said the truck came off the road and it plummeted. It came off the edge of a mountain. Anyway, I don't actually know where it happened. I should find this out for myself. But she said it was an 80-foot drop. She found out that later. She wouldn't have known at the time. But she was airborne, as they say. And she said a prayer to Jesus to protect her grandson. Please do not let anything happen to my grandson. Sweet Jesus. And she described that the truck landed, and it landed, I think, between a rock and a tree. I think that's how she described it. Like it sort of slotted into this spot, 80 foot down. Must have taken, I don't know how long it would take a truck to descend through the air, 80 feet through the air before landing. She may have been exaggerating. Of course, I'm not ruling that out. I had an accident myself at the age of, on my 33rd birthday, and I only just remembered this today. In the correlation there, obviously with the Christ myth. On my 33rd birthday, I came off the road in my van at midnight. I was very high on all manner of drugs, and I had a friend in the passenger seat, and we were airborne also, but it was just a riverbed, and it was probably 10 feet, I'd say. And even so, my face hit the steering wheel. I didn't say a prayer, by the way. I didn't have time, but I don't think I thought of having a prayer. I just thought, oh shit, am I going to die, or something like that. Anyway, my face hit the steering wheel, and it was very badly damaged. I still can feel it to this day in my teeth. When I did see myself after the accident, it looked as though my face was melting off. It was a very, very severe wound that I suffered from the accident. My friend and companion didn't, fortunately, suffer any serious damage. Anyway, that was 10 feet. So I could easily imagine what 80 feet would be, even if she's exaggerating and it was 40 feet. The chances of surviving an accident of that kind are not good, I would say. But she was fine. Her grandson was fine, and not only that, the truck which they pulled out and was parked on the street, because she showed it to me, was almost completely undamaged. She said there was a slight scratch on the front fender or something of that sort. So she recounted this experience, and she'd been telling my wife, and then my wife asked her to repeat it because I had showed up unexpectedly. And she told us that she recounted it, and she expressed her gratitude at this miracle that occurred. She was absolutely convinced that it was a miracle, it was an intervention, and that her grandson had been spared. And I said to her, she said she wasn't concerned about herself, and certainly not the truck. It was just her grandson. And I said it was a package deal. And one of the things that was surprising about this was that, because I wasn't quite sure how to respond. Like I was moved by her story, and I didn't doubt anything about it. I didn't doubt what she recounted, and I didn't doubt that some sort of miracle had occurred, and that miracle was related to her saying the name of Jesus. I say I didn't doubt. I mean, I would say I had some certain doubts around it, which is why I wanted to talk about it today, not simply to recount a wonderful story, but what it opened up in me, hearing it, including doubts, but then doubts about the doubts. But one of the things that she said that surprised me was that, or the way that she talked about it, what had happened, she mentioned that she wasn't really a believer herself. She knew there was something, and that something had definitely intervened there, but the way she described herself and her interpretation of the experience, she didn't identify as a Christian, even though she joined the local congregation. It seems as though that was an expression of gratitude and that she liked the people, but she herself wasn't, as I had at first assumed, a conventional Christian who had said a prayer and then it had been answered and just was saying praise Jesus. It wasn't like that. She was as amazed as I was, and as puzzled by it, perhaps, although I don't think she would be questioning it to the extent that I was and am. Anyway, so the first thoughts I had about that, the first doubts I had about that were, and this came up synchronicity has come up twice now in this week, because on the last podcast with Anonymous Italian, he mentioned praying to Jesus after the UFO experience, and how that came to his rescue. He was initially too frightened to even pray, but when he did finally pray, the terror went away. And I mentioned the placebo effect, and one of the thoughts I was having with him, I didn't want to say, was, is that really Jesus? I have, because I know that Jesus wasn't his name, it was Yeshua. Even something as simple as that causes me to doubt. Like, is this Jesus guy that millions of people worship, is that really Christ? Is that the divine, the incarnation, or the entity that was once incarnate, that does have the power to intervene? Or is it an egregore that can cause all kinds of psychic phenomena and trick us? Is it the counterfeit, or is it the real thing? And the literal equivalent of that, the literalization of that, well, he wasn't even called Jesus anyway, so if you're going to call the name of Jesus out, you probably won't get the real thing. That kind of literal mindedness, which, as maybe I'll get to, actually relates to occultism, I think, and the power of words, and that we have to say the right words to get the right effects. That's where my mind went. And also to finish, the third time this came up was yesterday, when I talked to and recorded a conversation with a survivor of satanic ritual abuse for the podcast, and she also mentioned that saying that the prayer to Jesus had rescued her in a time of need. So it's come up 3 times now in 1 week. And I realized that I was faced with a conundrum, because I have a whole belief system that I have developed that's also a knowledge base that I feel that I need to discern between truth and false, and to navigate this matrix world, and to recognize the counterfeit, to always be recognizing the counterfeit when I see it. And that part was trying to intervene with these accounts of prayers to Jesus that had rescued them, and question it. But another part felt that there was something real here that my mind not only couldn't get to grips with, but didn't want to know, didn't want to hear, and didn't want to think about. And I realized that with this woman in the thrift store, and presumably with the other 2 people, but just take one case at a time, this woman was a simple woman. I mean, not simple-minded, as I say, a talented writer, an intelligent person, but a simple kind of ordinary person, not sophisticated thinker or philosopher or anything like this. And she had been in a moment of crisis, and she had said a prayer, and somehow, maybe we don't want to jump to any conclusions about cause and effect, but somehow a miracle had occurred, that she and her grandson and even her truck had been spared harm under conditions that seemed that serious damage was inevitable. There had been an intervention, let's say. I mean, I'm not asking you to believe this. I'm saying that I believe this. But that belief creates a conflict in me. And the conflict is around, or it's pointing to how much I have become dependent on an internalized matrix of knowledge to protect me and to guide me through life. And what I believe was being shown to me by this woman and her experience, which I had only heard by chance, by a confluence of incidents that led me to be in the place I needed to be to hear it. What was being communicated was that there is something in all of us and in existence that transcends words and that transcends knowledge, and that if we connect to it, it will intervene, it will save us, literally speaking. In the case of this woman, I mean, physically speaking, literally, it will be our salvation. And what I would interpret then, again, bringing in, of course, my mind is still involved in this, or how I interpret this is that what this woman was describing to me was a moment in which she had surrendered and let go, and she had reached out with an open heart to life, what transcends life, the source of being, literally speaking, Jesus. She'd used the word Jesus. And it had been effective, and that this was nothing to do with the word Jesus. It was to do with the spirit in which the word was uttered, and the openness of heart, and the ability to surrender that coincided with that word. She hadn't said, she hadn't screamed, she said that she wasn't afraid, and she didn't think of herself, she only thought of her grandson. So she went into a state of unconditional love, and of where she was not thinking of herself but thinking of another. And so she was surrendered to what was happening, but at the same time her heart was directed towards what she loved, which was her grandson and Jesus. And it worked. And to me, that's very humbling. I mean, to me personally, because I don't want to believe that something like that could work, even though I recognize that's very selfish and mean-spirited of me. And I certainly didn't feel that when I was listening to the woman. I didn't want to question it. I wasn't questioning it. I was moved by her story. But I mean, when I take that back into my life, I don't want to take that on or into my life, because it throws into question my whole way of being, my reliance on intellect, my knowledge base. I mean, it directly throws into question my knowledge base, because I don't know how to explain that. I don't know what happened to that woman. I don't know if that was Jesus Christ. I don't know if it was God. I don't know if it was psychics. I don't know. I can't know. I don't want to try and figure it out. But I do know that I want to consider myself one of the chosen ones who knows Jeshua's true name, and has the right discernment and perception and insight and intelligence and wisdom and knowledge and power to be inducted into that special few. I know that I still carry that around with me. So the idea that somebody or anybody, the most ordinary persons under the extreme circumstances, could just say the name Jesus and be taken into his bosom, even though I think that that's a beautiful thing, and that's absolutely central to my idea about what Christ is. He takes all comers, and he's looking for the pure of heart, not the sophisticated of intellect or the heavy of knowledge, or those with the most profound knowledge bases. I know this, that's part of my knowledge base, but I'm still caught up in the business of accumulating knowledge and trying to apply knowledge, and so an account like this is threatening to me, but also an opportunity to look at what's going on there. And so I realized that this could be useful in terms of communicating with the people who are interested in what I do, because they're interested in what I do because of the things I look at and the things I explore to some extent. Some of you are interested in what I do just because you're interested in me, perhaps in the way I do it. Hopefully not in a cult of personality sort of way, but just the feeling of affinity, and that there's some kind of mysterious element there that's nourishing or enhancing in your lives, I hope, that isn't really about information sharing, but nonetheless, you must have found me somehow, and that must have been a shared interest in the material that I explore, and that is all about the darkness of this world, the organization of malevolence, the counterfeit, the conspiracy, the deception, the distortion, the trauma. It's all about the dark. And what I've been realizing more and more is, and I realized again with this experience, is that it's so hard for me to recognize and accept and embrace a simple testimonial about love and light and how it transcends everything, because of how immersed I am in the dark and how much knowledge I have about it. It seems well, it's unfamiliar. Let's just say that. It's unfamiliar. And so then that led me to wonder something that I think many people have wondered, how much of this material itself is a trapping? Does it trap our attention? Does it generate obsession, excessive, disproportionate fascination and sort of relentless pursuit of knowledge? Like the more we know, the more we feel we need to know. Hello, everyone, by the way. I'm checking the comments, but I'm not responding to any so far, but I will respond to questions. We pursue knowledge. The more knowledge we gather, the more knowledge we feel we need. And also, perhaps congruently, the more knowledge we gather about how the world works, the more aware we become of how bad things are. Not necessarily the worse we feel, but the harder it is to believe in goodness. Like it has to be, I mean, and this is a good thing also. Like I'm very cautious and aware. I'm very cautious about accepting a counterfeit. I want to really check if somebody's presenting something that supposedly is good or supposedly a solution. I'm going to check it, because we're surrounded by counterfeits, by bum currencies. But on the other hand, there is the danger that I will fail to recognize something good when it does come along, because I'm just so weary. My eyes are so weary from staring at the darkness that I can't even discern the light anymore. And I do think that's a real danger that I've become aware of this week, that there has to be a limit. There has to be a cutoff point for me and for everyone when it comes to investigating this world, because there's no bottom to it. It may not be literally infinite, but it's relatively infinite, because we, I as an individual don't have the capacity to map the whole world. It's ridiculous. It's like, as a child, I used to have these bizarre kind of nightmare fantasies about having to count every grain of sand on the planet. And I would imagine, even if it was a flat Earth, what if I actually had to do that? Imagine if I actually had to just travel around the planet, beach by beach, counting every grain of sand. If I was somehow so driven that even though I knew it was impossible, I would still try and do it. The nightmare of that. And similar to sorting the seeds in the myths. It's, what the individual psyche experiences when it glimpses infinity. It's trying to get to grips with that. It was my DMT experience, and it was like that too. And essentially, that there's a danger of doing that when it comes to trying to understand the world, existence, never mind God, or even ourselves. We can't understand anything completely. We can only experience it. And I've experienced this world, form of OCD nightmare, right? I've experienced this world. I've been imprinted by this world, and essentially, I'm trying to smooth out the imprint. I'm trying to dissolve the imprint. I'm moving my hand here because it's like pushing. It's like it's an imprint on the surface of my energy, and I want to push out enough, or to get filled up enough with energy that it pops out the imprint and makes it smooth again, makes my psyche smooth again. And same by this different analogy, clearing out, flushing out the toxins of the body by going into the body and re-experiencing the trauma. Where was I going with that? So I get distracted by the comments, which I want to, because there's some questions I want to answer, but I just want to finish the thought. Where was I going with that? Oh, the world, understanding the world. Right, so paranoia and metanoia. What occurred to me, I'm actually sort of trying to sum up what I had in mind for today. So that's why I'm a little bit constricted by that, because I do want to hit some points. Well, I've been writing and talking about paranoid awareness, or from a perspective of paranoid awareness, for a long time. So you listening, most likely all of you are, most of you anyway, are participating in the paranoid awareness. You have your own level of paranoid awareness, which means you're very skeptical, hopefully very discerning, but certainly very possibly cynical, very suspicious of, again, any kind of solutions, any kind of positive things, and you want to hear about the bad stuff. You want to get more into that. And so it's like, well, how do I begin to introduce narratives, descriptions that don't depend upon looking at the dark, that are simply positive, that emphasize love, freedom, joy, happiness, deliverance, salvation, without ending up like a dodgy spiritual car salesman. How do I do that in my own life, and also because it's a feedback loop, how do I introduce it to the people who have been drawn to me by a resonance with this predilection for the darkness that I have. Pluto first house for the astrologers among you. Okay, I'm going to catch up on the comments. Eli says, so planetary reality, as in nature, as being self-evident, has more truth or absolute truth than the truths living in the city of man. Certainly, I think that's true. What is your barrier to experience love in any given moment? Okay, I'll get to that, because that's obviously a very important question. Are you Christian or New Ageist? I'm neither. I'm very anti-New Age. I've written Prisoner of Infinities about the New Age movement partially, and how I see it as occultism light, transhumanism in the making, and even worse than that, let's say. Sorry, that's just that. Letting go of continuity is okay. Yes, right. I was thinking that in terms of my work and my output, I can make a total break with it. And at some point, I would like to, but I don't want to force it. Tasked with doing the impossible would be absolutely soul-destroying. Yes, that's right. The despair, I think, was of the counting the grains of sand. It was a nightmare of despair. Okay, wary of all religions. Yes, me too. Including spirituality. Yeah, me too. Is it possible to come from it? Is it possible to come from a neutral position? I don't think so. I think Yeah, I don't think so. I think we can be more objective, I suppose, or more impartial. But I think that also depends on being more honest with ourselves. So there's a short answer. It's a Dostoevsky-like challenge. Is that the grains of sand, I wonder, or something else? Listened to KMO of the Sea Realm podcast the other day, and he mentioned your old podcast, Stormy Weather, in high praise. I started listening after Liminalist took over, and curious if Stormy Weather is available. Yes, it is. It's at the website in the podcast archives, which is below the podcast link. I find myself looking too much into the negatives too. Do you see that there may be the opportunity for experiencing love in non-reciprocal service to others? Yes, there is. I've talked about this in my work at the thrift store. That I have found that it's easier to get through the day if I greet people with an openness that does allow a feeling of love and appreciation to come into. I don't mean that I would try and be loving with them or try and feel love to them. That would be futile. But to inhibit the automatic response, which will bring me actually to the other question I said I'd get to, which was irritation and the feeling of being, not with everyone, of course, but generally there's a feeling I have a defense reaction that comes up automatically when faced with anything difficult, even a thought, even a word, never mind a human being, that is somehow challenging in a way that I don't like, as in a way that doesn't inspire me or give me enthusiasm, that just makes me feel very mildly threatened. Even then, there's an automatic defense response, which is anger, which is what I want to get to in a moment. And that I found at the thrift store, if I would inhibit that, just consciously, just say, well, Jason, you don't have to actually be that person, because you're aware of making a choice. Somebody comes in, I think, I'm irritated, and now I'm going to say hello in such a way that communicates my irritation just subtly, so they know. There's a conscious process. It's very fast, but it's not so fast that I can't intervene and make a choice to express in a different way. I say, basically, no, okay, I feel that, but I will actually express, I won't, if anyone's been in a relationship, we know, like, we feel irritated, and then we consciously let the irritation show in our voice because we want the other person to know, because we want to get some reaction, we know that we do that, but we also know it's really hard not to do it, because it's not a strategy we work out and say, okay, I'm going to act irritated now. We're triggered, but we go along with the trigger. We have a rationale for the trigger. So it's a question of questioning the rationale and coming up with an alternate answer, which is, well, let's try something different. Let's try being just open and friendly, as if I was happy to see this person. It's not pretending, really. I don't see it as pretending, because I see my irritated persona as a false front anyway. So I'm not pretending any more than I would be anyway if I was acting irritated, put it that way. It's inhibiting. I'm inhibiting a reaction. And then, anyway, what I noticed was their response was very warm, and then I would feel, I would appreciate the person, I would enjoy the interaction, and then I would feel some love for them. So that would answer that question. Compassion, flat earth keeps coming up for some reason. Same here. Strangers are always a trigger, I guess, because we don't know the person, and it's a time and generation. Troubled times. Traversing the darkness is an act of faith itself, perhaps the ultimate way of following in Christ's footsteps. Yes, I think that's the case. But would it be seen as darkness to Christ? Is it, does the Christ within us see this world as darkness, or does he see it or can we see it in a different way, as something that is opaque but the light is still shining through? Therefore we can see the light, and actually the light allows us to see what is distorting or blocking the light, what is covering the lens through which we are perceiving the light, which is the world. But the world is in the eye of the beholder. So the distortion that I see in the world is the distortion that the world placed in me, that comes between me and the experience of existence. So so this has always been my understanding and my rationale, but I fear sometimes my rationalization for focusing on the world and its distortions was, well, I'm seeing them in myself this way. This is helping me to clear the lens. But, when you're wiping a window, you find, if you've ever done that, if you keep wiping too long, you end up wiping the dirt back on again. So at a certain point, you definitely have to stop and just let it be, or stop and wash the cloth and, start again with a new approach. So that's true in this case also. If the attempt to, get to the bottom of the world and clear away all the lies is compulsive, we end up just stirring up the waters, and instead of, we're stirring up the lake to try and get to the bottom, to see what's on the bottom, and that doesn't work. We just keep stirring up more mud, and it just stays cloudy that way. There has to be some stillness in there. And well, I mean, that stillness is what I felt I didn't have this week. And so I had a counter experience this week. I'm going to put as a sort of opposite narrative anyway to the lady in the truck, in the name of Jesus, was the podcast, the last podcast with Anonymous Italian, the great heartbreak of this world. Some of you may have noticed there were no show notes, and initially if you're on the email subscription, you would have seen initially I typed a petulant thing about how I had written show notes, but they'd been destroyed by artificial intelligence, and I was too exhausted to do anything about it, and so I just wrote this thing, and so those show notes got lost in two different places. I had them stored as drafts, and both of them got deleted by my own stupidity. But anyway, long story short, I was caught in this loop that many of you will have experienced, battling with technology to try and retrieve something that had been lost that was important to me, and becoming increasingly angry. And I got to the point where I was so angry I was shouting, and I was slamming my fist down on the desk. And that kind of anger is the kind of anger that I used to experience quite frequently, certainly once or twice a week, I'd say. And unfortunately, mercifully, it's become less. I'd say that it happens maybe once a month now. And that kind of just unbridled, uninhibited, and totally self-indulgent rage. And afterwards, I felt absolutely depleted. I felt exhausted and depressed. And I just lay down and I read. And my wife saw me right afterwards, and she just said, oh no. And she didn't ask what had happened. She could just see by my face I was in a bad place. But I mean, I have been a bit down this week. There's been other things going on. And anyway, since then, I've felt physically bad, and I've had this kind of constriction inside my chest, my stomach, esophagus, all the way up to the throat, coming and going, and still feel it now, that I haven't had for many years, and it was most serious at the time that I've talked about elsewhere, where I developed hookworm. I was writing about vampires, and I got hookworm, and I took medicine for it, and the medicine destroyed the hookworm, but did such damage to my internals that I couldn't eat for a long period. I was just having pea soup, and it was a really awful feeling. It is a terrible feeling. It's like the whole central nervous system, or, well, not the nervous system, but just this whole central strip is constricted, and like it has tentacles wrapped around it, and at its worst, it was like potentially whatever it was going to come up and strangle me. And those symptoms began, I think, that night or the next day. And that night, I had some very heavy dreams, and the last dream, I was praying to Christ, and I was praying to Christ not to forsake me, and I was crying out from this very deep despair and fear that I would be forsaken by Christ. And as I say, the symptoms persisted, and I realized throughout this that I can't afford to give in to rage, that by giving into rage, I was giving into something much more than just my own personal rage, and that it was possessing me, and that it was destroying me, and that if I continued to give into rage in that way, it would destroy me. And oh, that's right, that night I dreamt that the night that I ended up praying to Christ not to forsake me, I dreamt that I had a baby growing inside me, but it was a vicious creature with fangs and claws like a ferret or a weasel. So it wasn't so much growing inside me as, well, it was growing, but it was going to eat its way out of me or eat its way through me. It was this thing that was growing inside me would destroy me in order to be born. And that's what it feels like when the indigestion is really bad. It feels like something within me is eating me from the inside out. And well, I've been thinking about this, and I thought, first of all, well, this relates to. I'm not checking the questions now because I want to complete this package of sharing before I do. But I will get to the questions. In the conversation with Anonymous Italian, I talked about these traps that the demons lay for us, and I realized that what had happened that day was like a kind of trap, that whether it was demons, whether it was my own unconscious, whether it was ancestral fragments, whether it was malevolent human agents fucking with me through the technology, or a combination of all of the above. Certainly the technology and whatever kind of sentience it had was acting in the way that technology can to mess with me and create an impossible Chinese finger trap sort of situation, where the harder I tried to find a solution, the angrier I got. So I was getting pulled into this until eventually I exploded, and I was like, I let the demon possess me. And there's no doubt that kind of rage leads people to destroy other people, children, wives, husbands, family members, and themselves. If they turn it inward, it will destroy themselves. So I realized again, or I remembered how, for me, rage or anger is the demon. And I just thought about that, and theologically even, like, is Satan anger? Is Satan's tool anger? They say it's pride, and there's all kinds of different theological things about that. But certainly in my life, I would say, and I've taught this for a long time, if I were free of anger, I would be free. I would be free. It's the anger that controls me, that traps me, that imprisons me, and that fuels all of my destructive behaviors, whether it's conscious or not. Then I remembered that, and I think what caused me to remember was there's this painting. I think I'll go and get it. Painting I did. Hello. I didn't know you were there. I did this a couple of years, well, no more than about 5 years ago. And if you see, it began with the infant in the center. And that was me in the womb. And then all the other images are the different phases and stages of my life. Might not get the full thing, so it's on record, I guess. Anyway, so yeah, the dream reminded me, this clawed, fanged fetus inside me reminded me of the painting. And because of that, I remembered that, part of the reason I started the painting was because I know that two things about my gestation and my birth. I know that I was pickled in alcohol in the womb because my mother was drinking all through my her pregnancy with me, and even the birth. She was drinking brandy in the hospital when I was born. And the other thing that I was induced because she had given birth so quickly. This was her version, so quickly and easily to my brother Sebastian, that she was afraid, or the doctor was afraid, or claimed to be, that she would give birth to me at home and with nobody around, and that I would be at risk in some way because of that. So he persuaded her to have me induced, which involves giving her drugs so that the body contracts and forces me out of the womb prematurely. And when I thought about that more recently, a few years back, I realized that would mean that my birth, obviously I already realized that would mean my birth was difficult and unpleasant and unnatural, but I realized that chances are that my reaction to that as an infant would have been one of rage, resistance, fear, first of all, and then resistance, rage. And so then it occurred to me back then that, so maybe almost my first emotion was anger, fear and anger. We do have to get to the fear, I think. I think it's underneath the anger. There's also sorrow under there too. So it's not just about anger, but anger seems to be the one that puts itself forward, because that's exactly what anger is. It's a defense reaction. And so if a persona or an alter, an identity is forged out of anger, you could say that that's the constitution of the constructed identity, in my case at least, but I think it may be universal, and that is a kind of satanic implant. And it is in the myth, like Lucifer was angry with God because he wanted him to worship God's creation. He was jealous and he was angry. So it's also there in the theological myths, the rebellion of Lucifer is one of anger. So what I've been seeing this week is that I have this formative implant of rage, which is an altar, which is another identity that will possess me in times of need. It's there, it's sold itself, or it's presented itself as a protector and a guardian, so it's always there on hand. It's basically always at least subtly in control, but at times of extreme need, it takes over into fully, you could say this about, the government and the New World Order, that it's always there behind the scenes, but when the crisis comes and when push comes to shove, the velvet glove comes off and the iron fist descends. Well, that's how I am too. And I'm at a stage in life where I don't have enough life force anymore. Perhaps it's that, or perhaps there are other reasons, but to give into that force with the knowledge and the awareness that I now have is suicidal. I think because with increased awareness comes increased responsibility. So this is back nicely timed to Paranoia and Metanoia. Once we're sufficiently paranoid or aware of the darkness of this world and our complicity with it, repentance is the only sane, rational, and effective recourse. It has to lead to repentance. What that is, alignment with the good, with the light. Those are just words, turning away from the darkness towards the light, surrendering, because we are plummeting. I think we have come off the cliff's edge. We are airborne and we're about to hit, and we've only got a few seconds in which to say our prayer of unconditional love, to place our attention on that which matters and surrender everything else. And for me, well, I think anger is the red flag that lets me know how unsurrendered I am. And I see it more and more now, the micro reactions of anger that flare up in me throughout the day at almost everything. Almost everything I hear, see, or encounter, there's a critical response which wants to say, no, that's just shit, that's just wrong, that's counterfeit, that's a lie, you've been tricked, you're a fool, you're not as smart as I am, I'm better than you. Whatever it is, to reaffirm my own superiority to the world in order to feel safe within it, to assert my power. It's there in my every reaction because it's hardwired into my soul at this point, that implant. And I can feel it in my body. I can feel it consuming my energy to the extent that I let it. Okay, so I'm going to catch up because there have been many comments, so I'm going to catch up. I've been on for almost an hour, so I'll probably keep it to about an hour and 20 minutes as usual if I can. Okay, so if you stare into the abyss stares back at you. Excuse me, I'm going to belch. Maybe related. Do you feel like it is important to embrace the archetypal foolishness and trust that there is an underpinning love and that things will work out as they should with that trust? Yes, I do. And not as some law of attraction, mind over matter thing, but because it's true. I don't think we have to believe to make these things true. I think that they are true, and we want to get with what's true, with what's real. Otherwise, we're spinning our wheels, running away from paper tigers. Is there a difference in traversing the darkness as an ego versus condescending with God as a submitted servant? Well, yes, that was what I was touching on with what would this world look like? What does this world look like if we see it with the eyes of our soul and not with the eyes of our mind and our ego? It looks like a very different world. I think it's a heartbroken world, and we might weep a lot more than we do, but we wouldn't be angry about it. We wouldn't be afraid. Omar, you're talking about the vagus nerve, I think, the longest cranial nerve in the body. My paralysis of the esophagus and constricted severe pain is something I battled for years. Anger. Well, thank you. I'm glad to know that there's a physiological understanding of this that isn't, that's related to what I'm talking about, because I think that this is the unmapped terrain that psychological, metaphysical, and spiritual realities do correspond with physical experience. Absolutely, that's how we're going. That's how we know and experience them. But we've been quarantined in this mental, conceptual, scientific realm that has created a dichotomy. So that I've had so many conditions that can't be diagnosed by science or medicine. But I know that they're physical, and so I've had to come up with these metaphysical explanations, which have been potentially delusional. And actually, it has helped for me to have some quasi-scientific diagnosis, like chronic fatigue syndrome, not because they really explain anything, but because at least they allow me to start migrating away from the conceptual, spiritual realm, which isn't really spiritual, is it? It's back to the New Age thing, but spiritual concepts that my ego hooked into were actually very, they were counterproductive. Whereas when I started to try and understand it as a physical thing that other people were experiencing, I began to get more grounded in it. And I think it's both. It's the thing. Of course, the psyche and the body are interwoven together. Anyway, it was a long answer. So men carry within themselves archetypes and can affect your thoughts and actions. This is true. Well, I mean, that raises the question of archetypes and where they come from. So I'm just going to leave that as a question mark. I'm not sure. We certainly carry within us the traumata of body affect and personalities and behaviors and beliefs and thoughts and feelings. All, I think they're all sourced in those affective implants in the body. So, I mean, what's happening with me here, it could be very worrying, because it's like, oh my God, I haven't had symptoms like this since I was 35. I thought I was free of this. It's back, and it is a bit worrying. But also I think, well, this is my body it's becoming more sensitive and more awakened. And so whatever those implants are, even if they've been reduced, it's kind of complex, but I have more access to my life force now. So if I misuse my life force, then it will start to feed those still installed implants, and they can flare up very quickly because I have more life force to give to them. That's why I say with awareness comes responsibility. Because if we're aware of something, it means we have access to more life force, more of our soul, and we still act in a way we know is detrimental. Then we're giving consent with much more of our being. It's one thing if we're consenting completely ignorant, but it's another if I consent to raging like a petulant 5-year-old with a full awareness that this isn't true to me. Then there's a much greater portion of my energies then giving itself over to the devil of my rage. People like the painting. That's nice. Yes, it's good. I had some imagery. I should probably do more of that. Yes, fear, rage at being pushed, then pulled out. Yeah, the birth. I understand Christ as an archetypal energy which exists outside of culture, religion, one that can be embodied through intention. This is shown in acts of compassion, forgiveness, etc. by everyone. The pathologos was a separate comment. Interesting term. Like the ice angel. It's the guardian, yeah. Surrendering to one's true self. I think the true self, of course, is tricky because of how it's been co-opted. But essentially, yeah, to one's soul. It's called achalasia, meaning without movement. Had it for years and only diagnosed this past year. I'm not sure what's called achalasia, but I will definitely look that up. Any thoughts on anti-psychiatry, Thomas Zatz? I've noticed some similarities to René Girard, though I don't think they're in contact. I have read Zatz, but it was a long, long time ago. But I remember him being very good, very interesting. I'm a massage therapist. I absolutely concur that the psyche and the body are interlocked together. Yes, we hold body memories as well as spiritual memories. We are tripart beings, right? So I got, if I keep it to 20 as I like to, I got about 15 minutes or so, and I wanted to try and bring this back to the superculture and how there seems to be a world between this world we see and the spiritual realm that we come from and that we want to get back to or reconnect with. And that, at first glance, that appears to be the conspiracy, as you know, the dark social hidden aspect of this world. But the more those of us who look into it, the more we see that it seems to have a non-physical dimension, and even to be spiritual in some way. So this is what I'm getting at. This would be a misuse of the word spiritual. And of course, there's the famous St. Paul thing about we're here to battle with the powers and principalities of evil and spiritual darkness in high places. Something like that, which suggests that the more things change, the more they stay the same. And in St. Paul's day, or Paul's day, it was the same basic setup. Now, that does raise the question of, you know, are we supposed to battle with these powers and principalities or not? Because Christ said, resist not evil, but I won't get into that because that's a big can of fish. But what I wanted to touch on, briefly at least, is, as I say, this apparently non-physical dimension to the world, and how well, it's very, very difficult to talk about, but the gosh, okay, so paranoia, pronoia. So paranoia is an increased awareness of the nature of the world. Eventually that leads to an awareness that the world is configured not just politically, but somehow metaphysically, that there are metaphysical forces of darkness involved in the shaping of our world. And what I would say is that, and this is to the danger of looking at this stuff too much, that it can trap one, that the dangers of looking at the way in which our world seems to be ruled by metaphysical principles can lead to, obviously, a feeling of despair and of helplessness, and that evil reigns supreme, so to speak. The idea that this is Satan's realm is a religious and a Christian idea, and it's one thing if it's nested in a Christian faith in God. It's quite another if we arrive at it from a secular perspective, where all we can see is evidence of organized evil, and we begin to see that organized evil even bleeds off into the psychic realms. So then and I think central to this deception is that we confuse and conflate the psychic realms with the spiritual, and hence give in to despair. And also, well, if we have to get through the psychic realms in order to regain access to the spiritual, it's very easy to get lost in those psychic realms, because they are like configured like mazes, like demonic mazes. So if as we begin to become aware of the psychic dimensions, we have so conditioned and trained and learned through bad knowledge to believe in knowledge that the psychic is equivalent to the spiritual, and that we're encountering spiritual reality here, albeit of the dark side of it, rather than actual just a counterfeit that has no spiritual dimension whatsoever. It's an illusion. It's a trick. And if we don't see that, then rather than just going through it, we will begin to explore it, because it has these lures. It's kind of like the Bardo realms in the Tibetan Book of Dead that we have to watch out for when we die. They lure us. And I think central to how they lure us is that they give us enough knowledge to think that we need more knowledge in order to deal with what we are finding out. That's the trick. They're feeding the mind. In actual fact, we don't need knowledge to navigate our way back to God. We need divine intervention. We need to open our hearts and surrender. But how do you do that? I mean, that's a catch-22, because it's not an act. It's a state of openness and acceptance, of self-forgiveness and a willingness to let go of anger. So there is a process that is about gathering knowledge, but I suppose that well, discerning, part of why we gather knowledge is in order to discern between true and false. And so there's going to be an ongoing process of recognizing that a great deal of the knowledge we've gathered, even though it's helped us discern, has allowed us to discern that the knowledge we've gathered is useless. It has no inherent value. And I would say that about knowledge in general. There's only one kind of knowledge that has value, and we would say that is self-knowledge. And that's experience. Now, that does include reading and researching and learning things, but it's the experience that counts, the experience that we are able to gain through learning about the truth of the world, not the knowledge itself. And the danger that I see for myself becoming more aware of is that I know so much about the nature of the world now that it is hard for me not to look at other people as somehow inferior and as lacking something. I find it hard to believe that somebody could be saved, let's say, or experience grace, or know themselves, or become enlightened if they don't know what I know about the world. Like, you have to know this. This is the way the world is. Well, maybe, but maybe not. I think some of us have to do this work, but even there, we have to question how much and for how long. And I think it's enough to know. If enough of us can look at the truth and see the truth of the world and still be willing to love, not the world, but love, in the world, to move in the world lovingly and not defensively, that's a transformation. That's a surrender in and of itself, and that does make us of service to others, absolutely. But they don't need to know what we know. They will know things that they know, and they will be accessing the truth about themselves through their means. And so So that's just something that I've realized with myself, that it's sort of part of the same trap that I'm always in danger of getting pulled into, that I need to discover more and more and map more and more of the world, the nature of the world, in order to get free of it. And that the more I know, the more aware I become of how ignorant people are. Although, to be honest, I don't necessarily know that, because I don't always check. But there's an assumption that people can't possibly know the nature of this world because they wouldn't be living the way they live. But that's just an assumption, actually, because in many ways I still live in ways that seem to contradict what I know about the world, because it's very difficult to change the way that we live and behave. So well, I'd like to sort of sum up, if I can, but I'm not sure if I can, so I'll just read the questions. Yeah, okay, we hold body memories as well as spiritual memories, so I read that already. Great podcast, thank you. It has a symbolic dimension. Symbols, very interesting, actually. That was something I wanted to get back to briefly, was about knowledge and words, and how they are part of the occult ideology, the power of words, the power of knowledge. And that's a clue. It's even in, I think it was Behold a Pale Horse, the Bill Cooper thing, not a great source, but he wrote about how the Luciferian thing isn't merely the accumulation of knowledge, but the worship of knowledge. And that, to me, would relate to the belief that knowledge is power, and that power is what we need. The power is the currency of the universe. It's the currency of this world. And bringing it back to the experience I recounted of this woman who said the Jesus prayer, well, I think it illustrates how less knowledge can be more grace, I think. Because if that had been me, I might have said, sweet Jesus, and then thought, wait a minute, Jesus isn't the right name. Should I use Jeshua? Should I use Christ? Which is the right formula? And smash. And we'd have all been destroyed. In the normal result of an 80-foot drop off a cliff in a truck would have happened, because I wouldn't have been surrendering. I would have been going into my mind for the solution. I would have been praying for a result, and then I'd have been referring to this knowledge set that was given to me by the culture as the counterfeit for a felt lived connection and an acceptance of, or an opening to, the transmission to Christ, to God, to the divine, to our souls, to reality, to it, to the life force, that can only happen in the body and the heart. The heart is the body. It can't happen through the mind or in the mind. The mind can observe it, but the mind has to succeed in those moments. And if we have too much knowledge, our mind is very well, it's very active, and it's very proactive. It gets involved with everything. It has an opinion about everything. And I think that there is something in the cliche that the meek will inherit the earth, and that blessed are the poor, and that the simple of mind are pure of heart. And that's very hard for me to accept, because I've been encultured and conditioned and lived my life towards the elevation of the intellect and of knowledge, accumulation of knowledge. And I would say that in many ways it's probably delayed my happiness. In many ways, not in all. Okay, I almost said salvation there, but I want to be very careful with language. Because I always said happiness is kind of an even more loaded term. I could have said enlightenment too. Pathologos. It's a term from Pierre Grimes' work on philosophical midwifery, which describes the pathologos as having characteristics of a parasite. Interesting. It literally means a sick idea of the self. Oh, that's excellent. Although here I am, gathering more words and knowledge. It is a very useful one. The pathologos is transmitted intergenerationally and exerts an effect of amnesia to preserve itself from discovery and dissolution. That's remarkable. The sad consequence of all this is that we no longer know what to do with the real world, or we no longer know what the real world is, and we no longer see the real world. I get that assumption too. Yes, the worship of knowledge is Satanism. Thank you. Kind of a stretch, but I wonder if Agent Dale Cooper from Twin Peaks was a nod to Bill Cooper. There's somebody who got trapped by too much knowledge. Okay, so it's 12:21. That's very symmetrical. An hour and 20 minutes. There's 31 people, 8 likes. Just for those who aren't here. That's more than last time, or than any previous time. Not that it matters, but it's relevant. So yes, I'll wind up the stream now, and I don't know if I touched everything. I'll check my notes after to see if I hit all the points, but I'll continue this in Zoom if enough people want to come along. So what I'll do, you're welcome. What I'll do is I'll open the Zoom and I'll place the link there, and people show up. And if you see there's only 2 or 3 people, well, then nothing will happen. But provided there's enough of us, 4 or 5 people or more, then we'll continue over in Zoom. Somebody's already said they want Zoom, so that's a good sign. Right, so just give me a second. I should have got this already, but I didn't. Start. Okay, here it comes. All right, so there's the link for Zoom. I will be over there in about 3 minutes, and hopefully I'll see some of you there. Okay, thanks everyone for coming. Oh, I should do the thing. If you enjoyed this meet and you'd like to see more, if you consider donating, that would be a big help for me. You can do that at PayPal. It's Jason with a U at protonmail.com. Let me know it's about the YouTube meet, so I know it's for that. Also, if you want to buy Vice of Kings, you can do that via my website, Prisoner Infinity, Seen and Not Seen, other 2 parts of the trilogy. I'm writing about psychological operatives in Hollywood at my blog now. If you're interested in that, you could follow that and share your thoughts there. And there's the Liminalist, the weekly podcast. For those who don't know, you'll also find that at my site, which is horticulture.com. All right. Well, thanks again. And I will see some of you maybe over in the Zoom room.